Hey everybody, welcome to Workforce Gaming. I'm Brad, here with Doug.
Hey.
I'm excited to talk about Lost Judgment today. So, for those of you who are unaware what this game is, it is the essentially side stories, more or less at this point, of the Yakuza franchise, which if you follow our podcast, you will know I have gotten super into over the last 3 years, playing through basically the whole series over the course of the last 3 years from the beginning to end. So Judgment follows Yagami, who is this detective in Kamurocho. And so Yakuza, you get the criminal element. Judgment is more the law-abiding side, quote unquote, although for being a lawyer and a detective, he's into some shady stuff there.
In all those stories, like he always ends up getting wrapped into Yakuza stuff anyway. Like it could just, if you could easily call this a Yakuza game, right? Like there's enough Yakuza stuff that, yeah.
Well, so, and this one has some weird things for if you haven't played Like a Dragon, where some of the things that come out of what happens in Like a Dragon and how that affects the Yakuza, this like instantly picks up and you're like, oh, we're doing it with this group and this group. And I don't want to necessarily say too much because there are spoilers for Like a Dragon and how things pan out with Tojo Clan and everything else, but it's basically like you're immediately like, oh, we were doing this story and now the Yakuza's involved.
Gotcha, yeah.
Which is kind of the same way that the first one works. So Yagami's basically a lawyer and he's this big shot detective. Big shot's probably not a good word. He's this like pathetic, sad detective who has no money and like has a sad little like one-room office that he sleeps on his couch in his office.
Yeah.
Detective in Kamurocho. And basically the way that this game works is you start out doing one of like the normal detective missions that you do in the first game, and then you go back to the office like, well, that was our first job in like 9 months. This sucks. And then two of the side characters from the first game give you a call and are like, hey, like, we started our own detective agency because you do so well with this, and it was so great seeing you work and you help people. Like, I know you're probably busy and we look up to you and you're such a great
really
detective. Like, can you come to Yokohama and help us get our detective agency off the ground? We have this big case that we're working and we need your help. And like, we know you're busy, but please, if you could make time, we'd really appreciate it. And he's like,
that's great. Yeah.
I can be there tomorrow. So basically,
I think it's really funny too, because like I like how like separate they try to make these series, and it's like I like immediately like, okay, we got to get them to the new city we built for like the next three or four Yakuza games.
Oh yeah, you do bounce back and forth in this a little bit, and we can talk cities in a second because I think the same thing with Like a Dragon. There's definite pros and cons to each, but so basically you get there and they get this case about bullying in this school, and basically like I don't remember, like headmaster, principal, whatever his title is of this school. They're like, hey, like, we want you to see if this bullying's actually happening in our school.
Yeah.
Which is a little funky.
Yeah, I'm very curious how you feel about all the school stuff, but continue.
So the reason why is I work in a school, so I very much feel awkward with this kind of stuff. Like, it's the only reason I cannot play Persona, because it drives me crazy playing the like horrible asshole like high school students and like that. This one, I will just be upfront. There is a bunch of side story stuff that happens in the school, and I did none of it because it was like I started doing it, and it was like, I'm just at work right now. Like, I'm at work, and then there's some stuff that's funny. Like, ooh, this is sketchy, and it's like, again, having worked in a school for so long, like, I know so many situations that this is trying to emulate that it either felt like super far off from the way that this would actually go, because it's like I have multiple experiences with this and this is not how this is handled in a school, or it's like this feels icky because like I know how real this is.
Oh, and it's like it's either too far from home or too close to home.
Exactly. So I did a little bit just to kind of like test the waters, and there's a couple goofy ones that happen in there. There's like a side story where like there's some dude dressed up as like the full body science model running around scaring people, and that's one of the ridiculously goofy ones I still did. But
the fun Yakuza stuff,
but there's like a couple where like you follow the dance club and you become like the dance club instructor, and that's how you do the like dancing mini game. But like there's also this like weird thing going on with the dance, and it's like I can't I can't do that. But anyway, so you get brought in to handle this bullying, and then basically what it turns into is, and I don't want to give too much away because the story, like all Yakuza games, like slowly builds to the point where you get to the midway point, and then shit goes crazy, and then
everybody
you go to
betrays
the end,
everybody, and then
there's a lot of that in this one. Like the main antagonist villain like is like goes from like best friend to villain to best friend to villain to best friend over and over and over again.
Oh, that's fun.
A couple different characters do actually. So
sure, yeah,
because
standard Yakuza.
Yeah, standard Yakuza. But eventually, what it leads into is you see there's this guy who basically on a train is convicted of sexual assault, and then like in his court case when they're sentencing him, he's like, just so you know, the body of this kid who's been missing for a month, this address will show up 10 minutes. And then they like show this guy, like these cops or they're firefighters because the building's on fire, walk in and there's this dead body that this dude knew about and everybody's been looking for a month. So it kind of starts to tie into like, how did this guy know? What did this guy do? And that's where you're kind of like,
yeah,
the person who dies is a student teacher at this school. And that's where like the bullying, the school stuff all kind of ties together.
Gotcha.
So it actually
all ties together. Yeah.
It feels really awkward for about the first 3 hours because you're like, I'm in this school. Why the hell am I in this school? There's this weird, crazy murder that happened, which is literally the opening scene. It's just like you find this body. You're like, what is this? There's this court case about sexual assault happening. And all of it kind of seems really disconnected until about 2 or 3 hours. And we're like, oh, here we go.
Now I get what's going on. Yeah.
And then about 5 hours in is where the plot really starts clicking. You're like, okay, I'm seeing what's happening here.
So, I mean, as far as pacing, it seems like the Judgment games both do this kind of thing where it's like, you got to get through the first, like, building up of, like, 5 or 6 hours. Because even Yakuza games, I feel like they don't really do that. I mean, there's obviously build up in story, but there's enough crazy shit going on, like, before the crazier stuff happens. But it seems like Judgment kind of, like, because it takes itself more seriously, that it takes a little bit longer and slower pacing to build that. Does it feel like that it's okay doing that, or does it just feel slow, or is it just because the tone's different enough that it's like, oh, it's actually kind of neat seeing more of a slow burn?
It's one of those things where you're kind of waiting for it to happen.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think having a lot of experience with the Yakuza, you really know, like, I know what's coming. I know how crazy this is going to get.
Yeah.
So you're kind of just staring at it going, when is this going to happen?
Oh, sure.
So the first couple hours just do kind of feel dull. And again, I had the weird feeling with the school stuff like I normally do. So, like, that's a lot of the first 2 hours or so. So not only is it the slow build, but I'm also going like, I don't want to be in the school. Like, can't I just go
Oh, I can see. Yeah,
I want to get like, this is the part of the game that I was nervous about how I would feel about, because again, like, love JRPGs but can't play Persona just because there's so much school drama stuff in there. So that felt a little weird to me, but again, once it gets going, no problem at all. Again, once you start to see the ties together, it's like, okay, this builds in a really good way, it's paced in a really good way. There's the good, like, every 2 chapters, every 2 or 3 hours, big reveal, 2 or 3 hours, big reveal, 2 or 3 hours, big reveal. That works really well. Gameplay wise, I missed this. So essentially the way that the studio is handling their games now, since Like a Dragon, Yakuza is going to be turn-based and Judgment's going to be their old school, just beat the shit out of people game.
Yeah.
I kind of forgot how much I missed that in Like a Dragon, because I do like turn-based combat. So just enjoying Like a Dragon like I did, and then going back to this, kind of had that, like, really nostalgic feeling, even though it's only been a couple years, because just like, oh, we're back.
Yeah.
I can grab bikes and just whip them at people.
It is funny when you get tired of something for like 7 games if you include the original Judgment, and then it's like, I'm just tired of that stuff you do. It's like, oh, Like a Dragon. It's like, well, I missed the 6 games worth of other
yeah, exactly. And you just, it's I think it's because that combat, it works because it's just dumb and it's fun. Like, it's tough at points. There's styles to it. There's moves to it. There's all that stuff. But when you really boil it down to, most of the combat is like, can I grab this chair and smack somebody with it? It goes back to that old school, like, just beat 'em up feeling, but in 3D, and it works so well.
Does it feel better than the other Yakuza games? Like in the previous? Okay.
It's again, like, there is PS3 Yakuza combat. There is not PS3 Yakuza combat, and all of them kind of blend together once they switched over engines and all that stuff. Like, it is what it is, and it's every game basically running in that era of Yakuza games feels the same.
No, that is true. That's a good point. I don't know if they had updated the combat or something. Sometimes I expect too much of the Yakuza series.
I mean, they do what they do, and that's how they pump them out, like, every year. You mentioned cities before. Yokohama was one of my few issues I had with Like a Dragon, because Yokohama is gigantic. and feels very sparsely populated compared to Kamurocho, which, if you haven't played the games, Kamurocho, think like Las Vegas Strip, but the entire city. Yeah. Everywhere there's
That's interesting. Yeah, for sure.
everywhere there's just clumps of people. Everything is bright. Everything is huge. Everything is big. And then you go to Yokohama and it's just like, okay, this is like a normal city. Like, here's clearly our business district. Here's our waterfront. Like, it's more of what you'd picture. So Yokohama in Like a Dragon, I took taxis everywhere just because it was so big and it was such a pain in the ass to get everywhere because it was so big and there wasn't much interesting happening there. Lost Judgment gives you a skateboard, which completely fixes this problem because it's this weird middle ground where you actually feel like you get to places in the same time you would in Kamurocho because you're going faster because you're on the skateboard.
Oh, okay.
So everything feels closer together because the speed of your character is increased.
I'm trying to think if that would fix the issue, because that was actually one of the reasons I stopped Yakuza 7 was just because of how big the thing is. But I mean, do you think that's just is that a good enough? To me, that's kind of like that. To me, it seems like a band-aid. Like, increase player speed by 50%, and it's like, okay, we're good.
It for sure feels like a band-aid, and it's for sure one of those things where it's like, this was a criticism. Fine, Yagami gets a skateboard. Done. Are you happy he can move faster? Like, that's very much what it feels like, and you get it like right off the bat. It's right when you go to Yokohama. It's actually funny. It's like one of the guys you're working with is like, oh man, like, I have to get this limited edition skateboard before the scalpers do. Like, if you take my skateboard and get to this place before the scalpers get there, I'll let you keep it. And the whole thing's tied into like, oh, I got to get this thing fast. So it's just a fun way to kind of introduce that.
Does he know how to skateboard canonically, like in the games, or does he like just...
He picks it up and goes, and it's just like, we're off. So there's no like learning or anything. It's just like, yeah, just hold forward and you can put a circle to jump. So
there's no plot reason for. There's no canonical. Oh, I used to skateboard as a kid. It's just like, here's skateboard, now you can.
Oh no, it's literally like, can you take my skateboard and go get this? And he's like, yes. And then you're like, push forward to go faster on the skateboard. And you're like, okay, cool.
Sure.
But yeah, great game. I don't think it's as good as the first one.
Yeah.
It's, again, there's that weird slow beginning, the school stuff. The main villain, I kind of always waited for there to be something bigger, and there just never really was.
Sure.
Which, you know, again, I think that's one of those Yakuza things where you're just constantly like, this is going to get bigger, it's going to get bigger, it's going to be bigger.
Yeah.
Eventually, the leader of all of Japan is going to be who I'm fighting at the end of this thing, and by the end, you're like, oh, that's less. All right, I guess that fits, but I was kind of waiting for something bigger, but okay.
Did the series, because I remember the one thing that came out about Judgment that kind of defined as like being different than Yakuza was that it was tonally. I haven't played it, so I could be totally wrong. Is that it was tonally like more serious. Like, okay, for example, like you mentioned, like one of the characters on trial for sexual assault. Probably not something that they would do in Yakuza series.
It's not like super heavy into that.
Sure. Okay.
It's like, this is an element, and honestly, by the time the game's done, they do some things with that to make it even less heavy than it would have been otherwise.
Gotcha.
It does take things more seriously, I think, just because, again, it is, especially with this one, it's a lot of like teen bullying stuff.
Yeah,
this one specifically deals a lot with suicide. There's actually like some like trigger warnings towards the beginning, like, hey, like, this involves suicide, this involves bullying, this involves these. So it feels heavier just because of the situation that it's kind of built around.
But it's more not because of just like it's a hard-boiled murdery kind of like the first one was. It's more like a lot of the stuff involves like younger folks kind of thing in this case. Gotcha.
It's more this is serious real life stuff that like you can picture happening to people versus like, oh man, like the Ami Alliance is coming into our territory. We're gonna go fuck them up. Like, it's more okay, here's some serious things. How is Yagami handling it? How are the police handling it? How are the characters handling the situation? What are we doing? And that all kind of ties together to make this more serious tone. Again, still some goofy, weird stuff.
Sure.
Yagami is still kind of like goofy, funny guy a little bit. But it definitely has a more serious feel to it than a Yakuza game.
Gotcha.
But anyway, we are Warforce Gaming. You can follow us on Twitter at Warforce Gaming. Subscribe to wherever you're listening, and we will see you later.
Bye.